The Trump administration is facing mounting pressure over deadly strikes against alleged drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. On Sunday, U.S. President Trump said he might escalate the military campaign by targeting drug smugglers on land in Venezuela and other countries. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says he stands by the strikes, while lawmakers are calling for more transparency. We begin with this report from CGTN's Walter Morris.
From what I understood then and what I understand now, I fully support that strike. I would have made the same call myself.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is continuing his defense of strikes against alleged drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean, including a highly controversial follow-up strike that killed survivors of a first strike in early September. The Trump administration has destroyed nearly 24 boats since then, killing more than 80 people, and as a growing number of lawmakers in Washington are raising questions about whether the strikes are legal, Hegseth delivering this message over the weekend.
And here we've been clear, if you're working for a designated terrorist organization and you bring drugs to this country in a boat, we will find you and we will sink you.
Hegseth's comments coming just days after U.S. military Admiral Frank Bradley briefed members of Congress about the controversial follow-up strike in September. President Trump, meanwhile, has denied any knowledge of those military details.
I didn't know anything about people I wasn't involved in.
And as tensions grow between the U.S. and Venezuela and the U.S. continues increasing its presence in the region, even Trump's allies on Capitol Hill are pushing the administration for more transparency.
We heard one day that he had put an order in to kill the survivors. The next day we're hearing something else, and the next day we're hearing something else. But I will tell you, I am pleased with Congress's role of oversight. I think we're doing a really good job of demanding answers and getting answers.
While prominent Democrats are calling the administration's actions in the Caribbean criminal.
You had 2 survivors clinging to half of a boat, and then you went in and you killed them. That's a war crime.
We need to do this investigation now.
The intense scrutiny over Hegseth's role in the targeting of suspected drug boats also comes just days after a Pentagon Inspector General report found that Hegseth put U.S. personnel at risk back in March when he used the Signal messaging app to communicate sensitive information ahead of a military strike in Yemen. Walter Morris, CGTN, Washington.
Our first guest is an Emmy Award-winning journalist whose career at CNN included White House correspondent and Washington bureau chief. Frank Sesno is currently a professor at the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. He joins us right here in Washington, D.C. Frank, good to see you. As we heard in our report there are questions being raised over the U.S. military's targeting of boats in the Caribbean. The Trump administration alleges that these boats are being used to smuggle drugs into the United States. So far, at least 87 people have been killed in these strikes. But the one that's getting a lot of attention is this so-called double tap strike, in which 2 survivors of an initial strike were then hit again and they died. There are some experts as well as people in Congress who say this could amount to a war crime. So what kind of questions do these incidents and these attacks and this campaign raise about things like accountability, like oversight over what the military does, and of course justice?
I think the most fundamental questions that they raise, and it's the reason that these issues are resonating, controversy resonating so in the political and public spheres, is what is the justification for this action? What is the actual evidence, and what is the fundamental purpose of this military action? In all the years I've been in Washington and all the White Houses I have covered and studied and watched very closely, launching military action is something that's taken very seriously, and whether it's in the court of public opinion or for diplomacy, American administrations tend to go out of their way to explain the evidence they've got, the justifications they've got for taking military action. This administration has not done that. They have basically said, trust us, these are enemy combatants, they're drug runners, contrary to what has been discussed as international law. In cases like this, we're just going to take them out. And the problems that they've got, where you have complicated cases like this double tap, as you mentioned, it just makes that more glaring. And so it really is a fundamental question of explanation. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? and what's it built on? What's the evidence? What's this based on?
And looking at some of the political implications, Frank, I mean, absent any firm action from Congress, any firm oversight, I mean, how great is the risk that this could set a precedent which other leaders could use in the future when they believe that the United States is facing some kind of national security threat?
It moves the bar tremendously on where and how the United States has used force in the past and the level of explanation that's offered. Constitutionally, it is supposed to be the United States Congress that declares war or triggers military action. That has been weakened over a long period of time, actually. So this may well, as you say, change the precedent even further. And if the United States can now use these standards as determining when military action is permissible, will other countries follow suit? What will be the effects internationally? So there's a lot wrapped up in what right now are a series of incidents in the Caribbean.
At the center of all this, Frank, is the Secretary for Defense, Pete Hegseth. This is not the first controversy that he's been involved in since assuming office. In fact, the Office of the Inspector General found that Secretary Hegseth also jeopardized troop safety and violated Pentagon policy by discussing details of a pending airstrike on alleged Houthi targets in Yemen in the Middle East. And he did this on a messaging app. Democrats have called for Hegseth's resignation, saying that he's not fit to be in that position, but the president has backed his secretary. So politically, where does this put Hegseth?
It puts him in a more exposed position because while Republicans have not started calling for his ouster, a number of leading Republicans in Congress have not offered resounding endorsements or support. And there is word both inside the administration and among Republicans on the Hill that there's a lot of discomfort with the way Hegseth has run the Department of Defense, or as he calls it, the Department of War, since he took over mere months ago. It's interesting because Hegseth claimed that he had gotten total exoneration on that case that you mentioned, the bombing of the Houthis, through this investigative report by the Defense Department's Inspector General. That's the independent inspector who still exists in the Pentagon. And yet, while Hegseth claims total exoneration, the report itself contradicts that, saying that his messages created risk to operational security. And so how this resonates, we're still not seeing that really gaining super traction on the Hill, but there is clear concern, and I think Hegseth needs to worry about this.
Frank, the other issue that's getting a lot of attention, not just here in the United States, but around the world, is that of Trump's actions on immigrants here in the United States. The Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, says the Trump administration is planning to expand a travel ban on to more than 30 countries. It was initially 19. And this follows the shooting, the very tragic shooting of 2 national security guards right here in the middle of Washington, D.C. The suspect in that shooting had worked for the CIA in Afghanistan, and he received asylum earlier this year. You know, we've got this tragic shooting. One of the people shot has died. But now the Trump administration has responded by halting all asylum applications, and they've put green card holders, those people waiting for green cards, on hold as well. Is this an overreaction? I mean, and in a sense, is it also collective punishment?
It would be hard to conclude otherwise. As horrible as this event was in Washington, the shooting is tragic. It was an individual who did that, and there are thousands of Afghans who are living and working in the United States who put their lives on the line standing beside the United States when the U.S. was in Afghanistan. The Somalis who have been targeted in Minnesota and elsewhere, many have been living and working here, have been part of communities and families for a very long time. People who have applied for asylum in the United States, just as they've applied for asylum in other countries, in many cases are desperate to flee very dangerous and difficult situations. So it is a very, very sweeping order as a result of a handful of cases. And it, at a minimum, is creating mass confusion and chaos among those who are trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives. As a policy matter and as a political matter, it throws another very complicated element into the equation here. Donald Trump's base wanted him to follow through on some of these things that he said, where he was going to close America's borders. I'm not sure he extended the equation quite this far, but again, this brings more tension into the relationship over something that is very fundamental to the United States, which is an immigration issue.
Right, and I think it's fair to say, Frank, that the Trump administration is really trying to undo some of the fundamental principles on immigration, which have been really entrenched in this country since its early history, including in the laws of this country as well. He issued an executive order when he came to office saying that he wants to do away with something known as birthright citizenship, which essentially means that if someone is born in the United States, they automatically have United States citizenship. There are some who say, well, look, that's a violation of the Constitution, that's a violation of the 14th Amendment. But now the Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court says, yes, we will take this up. We will hear arguments on this. What does that tell you?
It tells us that this conversation that you and I are having right now shows the incredible breadth of what Donald Trump and the Trump administration is trying to change in the United States. From citizenship to immigration and asylum policies, to the way the Department of Defense conducts military operations. This is a remarkable time of transformation in the U.S. What does it mean to be a citizen here? And this is something that the Supreme Court, by the way, reaffirmed in 1898 when another case went before it, and the court, by a 6-2 ruling, flat out ruled that if you're born here, you're a citizen here. So I think that what these issues that we're talking about here really highlight is just how dramatically and divisively Donald Trump has brought to the administration this change platform that is not just change, but it's transformation.
Frank, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
For more on the U.S. military strikes and this week's top political stories, let's bring in our panel. Joining us now from Maryland is Joseph Williams. He is a former senior editor with U.S. News and World Report, and Jadan Horyn is a political analyst. He joins us from Miami. Thanks to both of you for being with us. Jadan, over the weekend, the United States Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, defended that decision for a second military strike on an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean. In military parlance, it's known as something as a double tap strike. This was this attack which killed 2 people who had survived the initial attack. Let's listen to what the Secretary had to say.
From what I understood then and what I understand now, I fully support that strike. I would have made the same call myself. Those who were involved in 20 years of conflict, Iraq and Afghanistan or elsewhere, know that reattacks and restrikes of combatants on the battlefield happen often. In this particular case, it was well within the authorities of Admiral Bradley, who's an incredible American, an American hero. And the 22 or 23 strikes since have followed the similar protocol.
So, Jadan, Secretary Hegseth has denied issuing that kill order for that second strike. He is pretty confident that these boats were shipping drugs to the United States, but has not provided a shred of evidence to back that claim. Is anyone going to be held accountable for this?
Well, I mean, we had a previous administration that had a disastrous debacle withdrawal from Afghanistan, and no one was held accountable, and Congress didn't do their proper oversight authority, whether it was Republican or Democrat. I think in this case, once again, the Pentagon, and this has been pretty much the theme since the start of the war on terror back in 2001, has been able to set a narrative, and the American people, while maybe skeptical of that, and the media questioning, it becomes the accepted narrative, and there's very little accountability and responsibility. I would say in this case, the onus is on Congress in order to ensure that, in fact, those individuals were hostile to the United States, and if so, then the Pentagon did what it was supposed to do, and if not, then demand proper accountability and provide proper oversight.
Joseph Williams, as Jadan points out, there's been a history of politicians making decisions and there's been no accountability for those decisions. He pointed out to at least two of them. Now, as there is video of this incident that took place, there are now demands that that video be made public. Those who have seen the video, and includes Democrat representatives, say that those two people who were clinging onto the boat were very close to dying, and it contradicts the official explanation that they were trying to flip the boat onto its right side, retrieve the cargo, which in this instance was drugs, and then make their way to the United States coast to ship those drugs in there, which incidentally is 2,000 miles away. I mean, should that video be made public, and should there be an investigation into what is going on here?
Well, the short answer to both those questions is yes and yes. Specifically, the narrative that they're propagating, that Pentagon is propagating here, that the two survivors were trying to flip the boat over and continue their run or signal for help. I mean, it's just insane. It's not coherent. It doesn't stand up to any kind of logical scrutiny. So the only way to have the American people decide who is really telling the truth, and even then that might not necessarily be the case, would be to release the video. If you have nothing to hide, then show everything. If you have nothing to hide, then make everything plain, including your evidence that they have, that those two victims, that those two supposed drug dealers were in fact carrying drugs, and we're not doing anything other than that is illegal. And furthermore, you can expand the camera back a little bit further, and even just focusing on this one so-called double tap strike, you can even question the entire logic of going after drug boats in the middle of the Caribbean. It makes no sense to have the world's largest military when we already have protocols for dealing with interdicting drug traffickers on the high seas. We already have a protocol for that. It beggars belief that this is the only way to deal with that problem. And furthermore, a lot of people can look back in history and say that the Defense Department sets the tone. And it's illogical to me as well for Pete Hegseth to claim that the buck does not stop with him.
Okay, Jadan, I want to turn now to immigration. That's a big topic making headlines around the country. The Trump administration has launched ICE raids targeting hundreds of undocumented Somali immigrants in Minneapolis-St. Paul, that region in the United States. U.S. President Trump, he stepped up the rhetoric against Somalis, and that comes in the wake of the shooting of two National Guard members in Washington, D.C. Let's listen to some of what the president had to say.
I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you. Okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I could say that about other countries, too. We could go one way or the other, and we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country.
So, Jadan, I mean, listening to the language the president used there, and one other point is that we're often told that the United States is a country of laws. But what right does the president have to decide who lives in the United States based on whether he likes them or not? He also appears to be obsessed with one of the House representatives who is of Somali descent. That's Representative Ilhan Omar.
Well, certainly the president and Representative Omar are strenuous critics of each other, and both have a history of saying very incendiary things. That entirely aside, it has been ruled many times by the Supreme Court, and it is entirely the prerogative of the executive and within their powers to determine who may enter the country. In Congress has an authority relating to the regulation of immigration, but the enforcement is entirely the executive. So in that sense, if the president deems a particular people from a particular failed state, whether the rhetoric around it is deemed appropriate or not, certainly the president has that authority. Now, that being said, in relation to this current scrutiny over Somali undocumented and illegal immigrants relates to both funding of transnational terror networks and improper vetting that occurred when those Somalis came over as refugee and asylum claims. Because Somalia is a failed state, And because we know that our own government, our own CIA, which had previously vetted that Afghan immigrant, and this is all in the wake of the deadly attack on the National Guard soldier in Washington, D.C., we know that our own government has been unable to properly vet and assess for potential radicalization or for terrorism of people coming into this country. Certainly, any administration, whether it be the Trump or the Biden or previous Obama or even before that the Bush administration, would look to failed state and near failed state actors and question the documentation provided, question the assurances given by NGOs and by UN relief agencies as to the actual identity of these people and whether or not they have connections to illegal, illicit, or terror organizations. And specifically with the Somali community, now that we know that at least $1 billion has been funded possibly to transnational terror organizations, there's going to be increased scrutiny and rhetoric from the president aside. It is definitely the prerogative of both this administration and Congress to ensure that people weren't inappropriately or poorly vetted in the granting of their asylum and those claims coming into the United States.
Joseph, what are your thoughts on the president's comments on Somali Americans? I mean, as we heard there, he called them garbage.
Well, I think there's a lot to unpack here, so I'm just going to take the minimum and start there. Number one, the president's remarks were patently racist. Let's call it what it is. It's racist. It's not intemperate. It is racist. Full stop. Number two, he is the chief executive of the United States. He represents us on the world stage. He represents supposedly all the people of the United States, and the United States is a country that is built on immigrants. That's number two. Number three, there is absolutely no evidence that any funds from Somali business people or from people who are immigrants have funded terrorism. That's another full stop. Show me the evidence, and then we'll have a discussion about that. The fourth point that I'd like to make is this has nothing to do with the Afghan asylum seeker who shot those two National Guards people. That person, in fact, was vetted not only by the CIA, but also by the Biden and the Trump administration. So I think that we're not talking about a case of radicalization here. We are talking about mental illness and the availability of weapons. And fifth and finally, I lived in Minnesota for many years. The Somali community there is very proud and very much a contributor to the economic and social development of that particular area of the country and to the nation writ large. I think that any suggestion that we should paint a broad brush just on the basis of the president's say-so is, number one, ludicrous, number two, against the facts, number three, possibly against the rule of law.
Just one question on the use of race, Joseph Williams. The United States Supreme Court recently cleared the way for immigration officers to use a person's skin color in deciding whether to stop them and question them. Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who's one of the Supreme Court justices, wrote that if lawful residents were picked up in raids, their detention would amount to only a temporary inconvenience. Now, skin color, I would imagine, does not constitute plausible cause to detain a person, even temporarily. And we've seen in practice that many are detained for days, even weeks. Others are being tackled to the ground. They're being pulled out of vehicles. These are U.S. citizens. Is race now going to be used when the administration targets those people that it thinks are in the country illegally?
Well, the question I have is, when has it not been used? We're going all the way back to the Muslim ban, where people of a particular faith, who, mind you, consist of all races. There are white Muslims, there are Asian Muslims. That ban was specifically targeted at countries whose majority populations were not white people. So I think it's always been in place. Now we're just kind of removing the nice language and the kind of cushioning around it. I mean, in the United States, as a person of color, race has never not been a factor in law enforcement, and specifically in broad-based law enforcement. Race can get you killed in this country. We see that race is being used to separate people from their families. A majority of the people who have been arrested on these immigration sweeps have not had criminal records, despite the president's rhetoric saying he is going after the worst of the worst. He is not doing that. I think the record pretty much speaks for itself.
Jadan, there has been evidence of that most of the people who've been arrested do not have any kind of criminal record. Tom Homan, who's known as the White House border czar, he defended ICE agents' actions during an interview with CNN. Let's listen to him.
I want to have faith that the ICE agents are gathering articulable facts for reasonable suspicion to detain somebody and question them. Look, threats on ICE officers are up 1,200%. They're being doxxed on social media. They're getting death threats every day. They've been attacked. They've been shot at, and you know, these officers out there look for the worst of the worst. So they're protecting themselves, and I think they're following the law.
So Jadan Horyn also says that U.S. citizens have nothing to fear, but should there be more monitoring over what this department is doing? Should there be more monitoring by Congress, for that matter?
Well, certainly Congress has a role to play, but Congress has abdicated their responsibility when it comes to proper immigration enforcement and reform for the past 3 or 4 decades. So I can't imagine that we're going to see any action from Congress. Now, that being said, I think we all need to move past the administration's rhetoric here that even those on the left and those in the media are parroting, which is that they're targeting only those individuals with what they, quote, deem criminal records, when it is quite clear that the administration and the large majority of the Republican base are targeting all individuals who are improperly documented or illegal, which is really what the overall overarching objective is of this administration that they made clear on day one, and then obviously said that they were targeting these individuals first. So I think finding individuals that are not criminals and highlighting them, what that does do for the administration in terms of winning the messaging war is it provides and shows that those individuals are still illegal and undocumented, right, and are being brought up in those sweeps. It's not American citizens. I think if more American citizens, to Joseph's point, were round up based on this new Supreme Court's immutable characteristics or use of certain languages, et cetera, then certainly I think you would see outcry from the American people. But once people find out those people are undocumented, it seems that there's a shrug.
Okay, Joseph, there's one final point I'm going to move on to, and I've only got a little bit of time, but the United States National Park Service announced over the weekend that Americans will no longer enjoy free admission to national parks on Juneteenth and Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But the Park Service is offering free entry on President Trump's birthday, June 14th, at around 100 park sites around the country. What do you make of this action?
It would be laughable if it weren't so serious. It is almost comically targeted, and almost it just kind of boggles the mind. So I think to keep it simple, I think it's clear what the message is being sent here. I think we understand, most people kind of understand it, and I don't think the American people actually like this. And I think we'll see what the American people literally think of it in about a year or so, give or take. And I don't think it's going to hold up very well on the long run. I think that a lot of things will be attributed to this president in his efforts to make us kind of a white ethno-nationalist state that will not wear well in history, and that will ultimately be overturned, one hopes, in the near and short-term future.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thanks to both of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.